Hey guys, Paul here from Meldrum Performance Coaching, and today we're going to be talking about some tips that you can use in your personal training business based on the concept or the findings of neuroscience. Now, when people talk about neuroscience, people start thinking we're going to be starting talking about regions of the brain and how certain things act, and it's going to be a very, very complex conversation. And realistically, neuroscience is an incredibly complex topic, but we don't need to use it that way to change our coaching with our clients. What's been found with neuroscience over a long period of time is that the brain is infinitely complex, but it does things in a very straightforward way that once you understand, you can start using it to make your coaching more effective. One of the things that I like to say when looking at new research and new science that comes out is it shouldn't change too much of what you do. You shouldn't have to revolutionize your coaching approach overnight, but using the principles of it can help make your coaching that much better. So with the brain, it's really simple. It basically operates on this at a very fundamental level. It senses what's going on, interprets it, it decides what to do, and then acts out. That is how our body responds to everything that happens to us. And there's 5 principles that underline that will help us to make those decisions and then those actions. The first one is to not die. That the first thing that the brain and you, me, everyone else is worried about at a subconscious level is making sure we don't die. It's the most important thing to do. From there, the brain is very energy efficient. It wants to conserve, sorry, it's not energy efficient, it uses a ton of energy. So it wants to conserve energy as much as possible. The brain uses 20% of your available glucose every day. So the brain we want to conserve energy by using habits. Habits, you guys have heard me talk about them many times. I'm sure in many of my different works, I talk about habits all the time because it's a very efficient way to get stuff done. We want to then strengthen pathways. So we want to change pathways that may be taking us in the wrong direction. And we need to be aware of that when we're changing pathways, it's going to take a long time. Brain also isn't that good at multitasking. We really aren't that great at it. We like to think that we are, but what happens when we multitask? We generally have a much higher rate of error and tasks take a lot longer. Plus, we also have to deal with the concept of switching. When we go from concept to concept that we're working with, there is a lag time there, and that all adds up and is very energy demanding. And then principle 5 is to use the whole brain. So we used to think that certain areas of the brain would take care of the whole task, but really it's a whole integrated approach. So how can we use those concepts in our coaching? Here's 5 really simple, really easy, and effective things to remember when you're coaching clients. The first one is when coaching, you need to be incredibly patient. So the reason I say that is a lot of coaches come to me for mentoring and coaching, and they ask me, how can I get my clients to change? How can I get them to do things faster? And what we need to remember is if we're working with a general population in particular, who may be, anywhere between 30, 40, 50 years old, older or younger, these pathways and these habits they've formed have been ingrained for a long period of time. Those neural pathways have been well myelinated, they're very well established. So changing these pathways is going to take you a long time. So hold on, it's okay, be patient. It's the exact same thing when you have a client who comes to you who moves in a certain way in a particular lift, which isn't probably the ideal way for them to move. And what you'll find out is it takes a long time to remind them and to coach them how to get better. So be patient. That is the first thing to remember when coaching, if we take anything away from the lessons that neuroscience has taught us. The second one is telling people to act differently. So being in a drill sergeant, having a coach-centered approach is going to activate the amygdala, which is how our body senses threats. So if we're constantly telling our clients what to do and we're going, you have to do this, you have to do that, it's going to create internal conflict. It's going to create what Daniel Goleman, the author of Emotional Intelligence, calls an amygdala hijack. So that's going to make the person automatically become more confrontational. That's not a good thing in this type of situation. So there are some times when using a coach-centered approach is incredibly important. That may be working with elite level athletes, etc. But with most clients, you want to use a coach-centered approach and be a lot more inclusive. When you include people in the decision-making process, they feel a lot more heard. They feel trusted. That creates that feeling of trust in the amygdala. Their level of stress is going to come down. They're going to be able to make better decisions. and they're going to feel better about the process in general. So all we have to do is not tell people to act differently, involve them in the decision-making process and see what they want to do. They get to go through the sense, interpret, decide, and act pathway. And if it's something that works well for them, what's going to happen going forward in the future is that they're going to trust you more with the things that you are delivering to them, because you can still deliver information, and they're going to end up making better and better decisions over time, which is going to lead to better outcomes and better results for you. Another thing to remember with coaching is to act the same to build trust. So what do I mean by that? Is your demeanor, your manner, the way you speak to people needs to become fairly consistent to be able to keep people on track. If you are quite erratic and wild, and one day you're coming in and you're like a rah-rah, exciting, yelling, screaming coach, and the next day you're really quiet and all that, and you're very submissive, and the next day you're coming in like a drill sergeant, what's happening there is the client will struggle to trust you at a deeper level. Reason being for that is there's no consistency there. Consistency breeds trust. It's the same thing with animals. We create rhythms and habits and behaviors for our animals when we're taking care of them, and they start to trust us more and more as they realize it's consistent. So in terms of how we act, how we communicate, and how we talk to our clients, being consistent day to day and having the same reactions to a certain thing is going to be very useful. There are times where it will be a good idea to act differently to provoke people into change when they're struggling, but that's going to come more from a question, and I'll do another podcast/video about that later. You also want to use customs and rituals. So with that, you want to kind of create certain things that you do with your clients every single time you see them to strengthen that bond. You want to create a bond, a rapport, and empathy between your client and yourself. This is why we see professional athletes, particularly in the American sports, go through elaborate handshake rituals. You'll see the basketball, though, all this kind of stuff. That's creating a bond between those players. The more we do that type of stuff with our clients, the better off we're going to be in getting them to trust us and creating emotional states for them. So if we see our client and fist bump or whatever's appropriate now in regards to COVID, which is something we need to be considerate of in terms of physical touch, but there are other rituals that we can do and customs that we do as part of the coaching process. And if we're consistent with them, people are going to deliver a higher level of trust. They're going to come to expect these things in the session. They're going to come to look forward to it. And from there, we can then use our client-centered coaching, so we're not telling people to act differently, to help the clients become the facilitators of their own change. Our goal just being to provide accountability and coaching to help them get there and to help communicate with them to get to the next stage. So everyone, that's a couple of principles from neuroscience that you can use to improve your coaching. Stay tuned. I'll be back real soon.